Great. We have people joined in with us now, Lee, so that's good. So obviously, thank everybody for joining us today. We're going to be talking about objection handling, and it's going to be quite good, I think. So we're going to, usually it's me just nattering away for 45 minutes and Lee popping in and every now and then, but we're going to really tag team it today because obviously Lee has such a wealth of knowledge in this kind of area. Obviously I come from a protection insurance side, but Lee, you come from it from a all full IFA side in terms of the objection. So it'd be really, really interesting just to, I think, do this as a mixture together. As always, this is being recorded. There is going to be a video recording. The audio recording will be going out. Lots of people listen to this and watch this on playback. So if you're happy to be involved, then you can, do feel free to take off muting, feel free to take off, the videos being off or anything like that. You can be involved, but just bear in mind that will go out on sort of like the recording that we're going to be sharing with people. Okay. So Lee, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So welcome to another one of these sessions. I really enjoy these, and I know that lots of people do watch them on playback because I often get messages in Octo saying, I can't make it, will it be recorded, and all that kind of stuff. So as Catherine has said, typically I get the easy job, which is just to kind of sit in the background and wrangle questions towards the end, but we're going to both stay on this time. And we'll kind of sort of tag team our way through objection handling, which is one of my favorite things, fun enough, having been, for those that don't know me, I was a kind of 30-year financial advisor stroke financial planner. And I love objection handling. It's one of the things that I really, really enjoy. So I'm genuinely excited by this as we wander through. So it'll be a kind of more of a conversation, this one, rather than a kind of show and tell, if that makes sense, guys. But all questions are absolutely welcome. You're very welcome to be on screen to ask questions, at any time, or if you prefer to put them into the chat, just do that too. Any which way that works for you guys. And we do love questions, don't we, Catherine?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The more challenging, the better. Love it. So
great.
So in terms of, I think the key thing for me when it comes to objection handling and it's starting off, and I really dislike it when I see, advisors who will say things like, if your recommendation's good enough, the people will take it. And I always just think, no, that's not the case. You can make the absolute best recommendation going for a client, and that client might not go ahead. We're not going to convert every single person. If you did, then in a sense, probably stop being a financial advisor and be somebody who trains people on how to convert people, because it'd be phenomenal if you had 100% conversion rate. And there's so many reasons for that. And it could be that the client's circumstances have changed. That's one reason. It could be that they haven't particularly engaged with what you're trying to suggest to them. It might be that you have another advisor firm that you're up against. I'm sure all of us have experienced that, where you're saying one thing to a client, someone else is putting little whispers in their mind and trying to steal them away and things like that. And things like that can happen. But I think a key thing is to just make sure that you remain true to yourself, and that, in a sense, you stick to your guns in terms of your advice and knowing who you are. But we can really do things to help in terms of overcoming those objections, overcoming that somebody's just going, I'm not too sure. And part of that is understanding what your client needs, and not just in a sense of from a recommendation point of view when we're looking at their financial plan, but it's looking at how they need to hear that information. So obviously everybody has different personality types. I have a very specific personality type. Lee, you'll have one as well. You do tend to find that you'll sometimes see certain personalities in certain job roles, or it's not always the case, but you can do. But it's so important with every single client to just kind of reset and go, right, how do they need this information in front of them, and how you can present it to them. Another thing I really dislike, and again, it comes often hand in hand with objection handling, is sales training. I really dislike it on the basis, on the basis that we're not salespeople, we're advisors. And when I do training, one of the things I put up is like this buzz sheet of words that are sales words. That basically, if you use all these words, you get the sales. If you use all these words, you're going to convert people. And it's just like, so many of them are just not relevant at all to what we will be doing in terms of protection insurance. or other kind of financial things. Some of them would be bordering into scaremongering and things like that, which we really, really can't be doing. And we'll talk a little bit. Hopefully we'll have time to talk about how we can disturb, we can make people think about situations, but we can't scare them. So a good example in terms of like understanding how your client gets information and needs information is this. So as an example, I'm a personality type where if you were to give me a recommendation, Lee, and you have built me this beautiful plan, you've done my cash flow, you've done my pensions, you've done my investments, you've told me the insurances, and you've given me, which I know a lot of IFAs do, they give me, you know, a good hefty report to say what I need to have. I'm going to ignore the majority of that report, and I'm going to look for the highlights. I'm going to look for the bullet points. I'm going to look for the bit in pretty colours that you've made stand out for me. I'm not going to read the full thing. And that's because that's my mind works and how I need the information. And also in terms of my time, I simply do not have time to read a really long report. And you are the expert to me. So I trust that what you've said there is fine. And then on the other scale of side of things, because obviously there's always a scale of flowing. So I'm very much, give me my bullet points and then I'll go from there. And on the other scale of things, you get the people who need an essay and they need it always, and they want that report. They're not doing anything unless they've read every single part of it. They're going to come back and challenge you. They're going to go do their own research and come back and say, well, you've said to do this, but I was reading this over here. And just got someone at the moment who sent me something going, well, I've watched this YouTube video and they said this. And I'm thinking, oh, no, I'm not even going to go into that kind of a realm of debating with people in terms of YouTube content. And what's really interesting is that, especially the people who need like that essay amount, and you can often find actually that a lot of IFAs are the people who would need that essay amount, and if they were making their own decisions on their own financial planning, is that they think it's absolutely bonkers that a person like me could just look at bullet points and that is what I need. But that comes down to the key thing here in the sense of that objection handling. And the starting point is that just how are we presenting that information, keeping it to as minimal as possible in sense of technical jargon. Yes, we have to do things in terms of certain levels of compliance and things like that. But generally, we're going to be making sure that how do they need to see it? I'm going to present it that way. So for me, if it was somebody like me, see, I know it can scare people as well to do this because you're thinking, oh no, I need to be able to make sure they've seen this and that. I need to know that they've seen everything. So with me, you give me a bullet points, and that's how you get me to then get me to spend the time to read the actual report and to make sure that I'm happy with it. So it's all about flowing and adapting as much as possible. And I'm assuming, Lee, that you've seen very similar things when you've been advising too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it often depends on context, doesn't it? I mean, financial planners will build, as you say, a financial plan. So there's a lot of context around it. You know, it's about building wealth, maintaining wealth, protecting family. And I'm very much on record. I'm a huge advocate of protection. And for me, it's like that's the first building block of any financial plan.
Yeah.
Protect you and your loved ones from calamity or disaster by the transference of risk to an insurance company. So, and that's how I used to kind of frame it for clients. But a bit like you, I'm not a massive one, despite the fact we used to churn out these 100-page reports because we felt that's what the regulator wanted and the PI insurers wanted. I'm very much, we used to have something called an executive summary, which was very much what you said, the bullet points, the kind of the high level, this is what I need to consider. And talk about client types. I mean, there are very, very definitely client types. I used to find that engineers, doctors, airline pilots, funnily enough, and I had all three of those as clients, were very, very analytical. Vets as well. They wanted to get right down into the weeds of anything that you said, and they would challenge and they would question, not because they were particularly objecting to your advice, they just needed to understand the advice. Whereas at the other end, I had lots of Lloyd's brokers. Interestingly, they just weren't bothered at all. I had quite a few creatives, and they just said, I trust you, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, you know, which in its own way is almost as difficult because you think you're not paying attention here. I need you to understand what you're signing up for, what the ramifications are, what the cost is, what the benefits are, etc. So yeah, absolutely. But I think contextually for me, it was always about, and I'm very visual, so I like short, snappy stuff, and I particularly like pictures drawn either in front of me or in my head. And for me, it was all about, you know, and typically there's a couple involved, isn't there, one way or another, with protection, or at least family. And I used to draw that mental picture of, if one of you wasn't here tomorrow,
Yeah.
what would the financial situation look like? And we used to do that before and after kind of thing. And very often you used to get different responses from within the couple.
Yeah.
I think men are, and this is such a generalization, I know that, but I think men are very much, let's just, we'll be fine. Whereas I think women are, they're not as shallow, and I know I'm generalizing, they're not as shallow, they think deeper, they have more maternal instinct and all that stuff that I'm generalizing about. So they are very much interested in protection. So I think it's a really important thing to have both people involved in the decision making.
Yeah.
And not let one override the other. And you go back to, I'm just going to pick up on your sales training. I came into the industry through direct sales, and it was all about disturbing. We used to call it coffin rattling. It's such a terrible phrase, but they used to call it coffin rattling, and used to worry people into taking your advice. And it's not about worrying clients to take advice. It's not overselling to them. And it's that old cliche that protection is sold, not bought, which I don't believe, actually. I've never actually believed that, even in the earliest days. But I think if you can paint a strong picture of the aftermath of some calamity, people do engage with the process and do the thinking. You can be over analytical in these big reports saying, and if this happened at year X and that happened at year Y and that inheritance happened there, clients get kind of confused by it unless they're particularly analytical. So it's about painting a strong picture mentally for them, I think, to engage with what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And I think I always come from the basis when I'm doing the training to sort of say to people, what is the trigger? Because there's a trigger somewhere. It doesn't matter what area of financial advice we're discussing. There is a trigger that's done something. So if you're mortgage based, the trigger is they want their dream home. And a really common thing that I am asked by mortgage advisors is that, where do I bring the protection conversation in? And the answer is from the start, because the thing is, right, the trigger is, the concern is, you want your dream home. I'm going to get you your dream home. I'm also going to be giving you the means to protect that home so that you can keep it if something goes wrong. And if you say that to people from the start, it's very, very rare for somebody to go, yeah, I'd rather not have that protection, in a sense. It's making sure that while you have them, while that trigger's there, they have a concern, you're fulfilling that concern. And it's also as well having that manner about yourself as well, about the fact that you are the advisor. And I think a lot of people don't sometimes sort of sit there and it comes down to your own personality types. And my personality type is very much a case of I am the advisor kind of thing. Not everybody is like that. But I like to use example, if you went to a solicitor or an accountant and they said to you, right, you came to me because you want a will, but we actually also need to do this, this, and this, and you need to do this, this, and that, the majority of people aren't going to debate with a solicitor because they're seen as a solicitor. They know everything. They're going to get everything right for us. And we're the same as advisors. We know our stuff, and there's a lot that's going on. There's a lot of trickiness. I obviously just work in the protection insurance space, and I literally would not have time to do any other area of advice because of just how complicated, how tricky, how many people are wanting advice in this area and needing that advice. So even if it's just so complicated there, even imagine all the other stuff. So no, it's very, very much a case of, I am the advisor. We are going to be doing this. And one of the things that I think sort of like, Lee, I think I'd sort of seen you sort of say this or something, is getting this kind of option to say to people, well, I am doing this, but you're going to opt out. If you're not going to do this, then you're opting out of it. I think I've seen somewhere that you'd written that, and I do that in my demands and needs reports, which is our recommendation reports we give to our clients. So if I say to somebody, on the lines of, I want you to have life insurance and you need income protection, and they don't, out of the two, it's more likely that they don't go for the income protection because it is a higher cost usually. Then I will say in my report, I have recommended that you have this, and you have decided to not have that. And I'll also say that to my clients as well when I'm on the phone to them. If they say, well, we're not going to go ahead with that, and I'll just say, that's absolutely fine. It's completely up to you. Just so you know, my recommendation report will include information about it to say that I have recommended that to you, but you've decided not to take it. And at that point, it can sometimes make people go, oh, kind of thing. And, I think it's important as well not to be worried to sort of like, in a polite way, confront that kind of decision by somebody to not go ahead with something, because then it makes them think, oh, actually, no, this is more serious because of the fact that it's going to be written down that I didn't choose to have this. And then you just say, it's just my compliance. And it is your compliance as well. My compliance is I need to be clear as to what I have and haven't recommended that you take out. I am recommending this. You are choosing these options. So I'm also going to mark down what you've not gone ahead with, because then also you might look at this in a few months' time and decide that you do want to go ahead with it. And it's important for you to see what it looks like.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I probably have said about it because I'm such a strong believer in protection. I probably have said this. I always work on kind of assumed consent, if that makes sense. It's probably a bad phrase, but I would say to clients during the process, and we all say it in different ways at different times to different clients, but I used to say things like, I have a duty of care to you to build you the best financial plan I possibly can to achieve the objectives that we have agreed or we are agreeing together, which is to build and maintain wealth, to be tax efficient, to protect assets, to protect your family, all this kind of stuff. And I pepper my discussion with those kind of phrases. So I always worked on assumed consent, that as the professional with a duty of care, and we've got consumer duty overlaying everything we do now, which makes what you've just said even more important. But I used to work on this. So when I present my plan to you, it will include elements to address all of the issues that we will identify together that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
And then things like budgeting and how much they can afford and all that kind of stuff come sort of further down. But I start that discussion all the way through. And it's a rubbish analogy. But I remember years ago being in a fast food thing. And there was a sticker. I wasn't meant to see it, but I was probably leaning over the counter or something, or it was side on. But there was a sticker on something behind the counter that said, always assume they do want to supersize. And I've always really loved that. So I kind of, this is because I told you I love to build pictures, and it was just a great picture in my head. So I always assume every client wants to supersize on my advice, which is to take every single piece of advice that I offer in all honesty and integrity in my professional skill set. So I think that's, for me, it's a very pictorial thing. Supersize your advice. They will take protection. They will take pension planning. They will take whatever.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I do something similar to that. I don't call it supersizing. I call it all singing, all dancing version. And I will use that term with clients. So especially things like critical illness cover and income protection. Obviously, we've got so many options. Critical illness cover, often 4 options per firm. Income protection, just more, even more than that per firm. And what I will say to people each time is that I'm going to give you the absolute best, because I want you to see the absolute best. And then if it doesn't feel like it's in affordability, or for whatever reason it doesn't feel right, we can then work backwards. And it's also coming down to, I say we're not salespeople, but it is down to a little bit of a sales technique as well, in the sense of it is much easier to say to somebody, it costs £50 for the best one, but if you don't want the best one, we can maybe do a 30 quid option, and for them to walk away with something, than to say it's 30 quid at the start. Oh, but you could get the really good one for 50 quid. It's much more unlikely that somebody is going to go for the higher version once you've given them that cheaper option. And obviously, generally, there is a much higher quality when you're going for the higher amount. And again, I think if you position it to say, look, this is the top bracket, it's not suddenly going to go higher. This is the absolute top. And we can just bring it down, we can build it, we can tweak it, we can amend it. Then it gives people also that sense of control and a lot of understanding of what's going on, because you are going to be talking about, well, this is what core is versus the upgraded or the enhanced. This is what it means if you are going to do your deferred period longer on the income protection. I'm not talking too much on the life insurance side of things, because I always think that generally with life insurance, that is the one that is quite easy to get people to be engaged with, because it's kind of seen as like the grown-up thing to do. Life insurance is the cheapest usually out of all of them. And I think sometimes people can be a little bit dubious about critical illness cover and income protection. They can sometimes get a bit confused as to whether or not they're actually private medical insurance or not. So you have to go through all of that kind of explanation. They wonder, well, what's it actually going to be like if, what's the likelihood of me claiming on this? And it is important, as we said, to address the concerns. Like you had a really good example before, Lee, when you were saying that about the whole thing about what happens tomorrow if you're not here. That's obviously a really nice way of phrasing it, rather than if you die tomorrow. That's a bit blunt, it's a bit intense. When I was doing some training, I had somebody, because I said to them, don't ever do this. And this person said to me, like, actually, my my person at my network gave me that as an exact example to use, which was basically like, right, let's talk about it. 6 months time, you're diagnosed with breast cancer, you're going to be out of work, you know, like you're going to have someone looking after your kids, da, 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 da. To me, that is too much. Also as well, if you're very early conversations, you don't know what that person's situation is. So they could have already had something like breast cancer themselves. They might have had somebody very close to them who's had it or even passed away, somebody who's going through it now. And that in itself would be incredibly difficult to handle. You're going to put them in quite a vulnerable situation, which we need to avoid. There's nothing wrong with saying, like, so if you're ill and unable to work tomorrow, right, at the moment, statutory sick pay is what, roughly £3,000 to live off for 6.5 months. Do you have savings in place to make sure that you're okay for that next 6.5 months?
I think that's kind of where financial planners have a slight edge sometimes in terms of the context of this discussion, because you probably worked out your cash flow. You know what the surplus cash is. You know what the kind of implications are. So as opposed to going in just to talk about protection, which, and I have all respect, as you know, for everyone that talks protection, but I think that's where we often have a slight advantage. And this thing about going for the all singing, all dancing, or the supersize, you know, the skiing downhill thing starts. I mean, there's a whole lot of psychology around that, which is why if you're ever buying software, another rubbish analogy, but they often have 3 or 4 different subscription levels, and they make one of them, the middle one, slightly bigger.
Yes.
And there's all this thing about, you know what, I bet that's what most people do, so I'll do that. But I think financial planners, I think we are doing ourselves a disservice if we don't strongly talk up the supersize, all singing, all dancing, because that's absolutely what they need. We don't just pluck that out of the air. That's what we've decided as professional advisors that the client actually needs. And then of course it's the budgeting thing, but I think we've got a slight advantage there because we will often know the budget as opposed to trying to get into the budget because we've cash flow modeled it.
Absolutely. You know, I think, you know, the cash flow modeling side of things, it isn't something that lots of protection firms do.
No.
We don't do it as a protection firm. But it is incredibly useful because then, as you say, you can say, right, well, this is doing it here and this is doing it there. And as you say, this is the surplus to go for this. And I think that sort of takes us nicely to talk about how do we talk about the objections to the premium. So again, you know, the amount of people that will say on lines of, well, it just costs, you know, income protection, it's what, it's maybe £1 a month. And you know, for some people, it's not just £1 a month. You know, sorry, not £1 a month, £1 a day. Would be nice if it was £1 a month.
I was thinking that.
I was thinking that, yeah, let's all go take out. I would say like £1 a day, or maybe a couple of pounds a day, kind of thing. And people say, well, you know, but it's, you know, it's just the equivalent of Sky TV, and this is so much more important. It's just like getting, you know, don't have a Costa coffee, do one from home, and I think that's often said, and it's said quite a lot for people who are 30s or younger, and to be honest, I think that group of people are getting a bit ticked off with the amount of people who are saying to them, don't go have a fancy coffee. You know, sometimes there's so much in life that gives us joy and so much that doesn't give us joy. And honestly, if you want to get yourself a fancy coffee in the morning and that gives you that joy for the day to cope with the day of work, then just have your coffee in a sense. And we know full well that in the long-term plan, it's much, much better for them to have these insurances and not. But we are asking them to take out a policy that is going to either sit in a drawer as a piece of paper, or it is going to be a PDF on a computer. And we hope that they are never, ever going to be claiming on it. There are obviously lots of extras now with these policies, such as, and it's very important to say quite a lot of these are non-contractual. Always make sure that you're saying to your client that they're non-contractual. They could be removed or changed. So things like access to GPs, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the mental health support, sometimes access to physios, occupational therapists. There's so much that's available that will genuinely be helping people through the life of the policy, not just if there's going to be an actual claim at some point. And it's those things as well that obviously they are really important, and they do help people. They do help people to understand the need for it. But again, depending upon the age group of somebody, depending upon their personal experience, they might not think of some things like the rest of us as being really high risk. So when I'm doing lots of stuff in terms of training about underwriting, you know, we're now at a stage where it's more than 1 in 2 people develop cancer at some point. every hour in the UK, 2 people are diagnosed with Parkinson's, and every 5 minutes, someone is admitted to hospital with a heart attack. That is a phenomenal amount of people. And those are very, very clear reasons as to why we'd be wanting something like at least like critical illness cover. But we do have to bear in mind that for some people, we talk about those premiums, we've got to make the, like we say, the budget work with what's going to work with them, with the bits of joy that bring them joy now. I've lost my train of thought there for a minute there, Lee. I don't know if you want to jump in with something.
Yeah, well, you're talking about this kind of, not patronizing people by saying if you give up a coffee, you can afford protection and that kind of stuff. I mean, I think one of the things, this reverse psychology, I quite often used to say to clients, I used to say, I want this amongst all your investments that we're talking about. And I know I'm coming from the financial planning end. I want this to be your worst investment you ever make.
Yeah.
Because I want you never to have to claim on it.
Yeah.
And they kind of go, what? And then you disturb them in a different way. You say, because if you claim on it, a calamity has happened. You've been ill, someone's died, or whatever, however you describe that is part of your discussion. But I always just say that, you know what? I want this to be the worst investment you've ever made. I still want you to make it, but actually, I hope that it never has to pay out, that it's never enacted. And some people see that and well, I never thought about it that way, because all they see is a cost,
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think you're absolutely right about not patronizing. On the financial advice, financial planning side, people have been doing this forever. Talking about give up a coffee, give up a gym membership, it's kind of stuff. People still have to be fit, and people still have to enjoy themselves. It's about a matter of priorities, isn't it?
It is, and so we can't take away people's joy. If that coffee, I do like to have a nice little coffee every now and then when I go out. I don't want to give that up to not have the insurances. The other thing for us to consider is possibly the objections for if there's been premium ratings or exclusions. So one of my things that I do and my firm do in terms of premiums is that we do not give clients the premium until we understand more about their health and their lifestyle, because it can really change. And I always say it's a bit like that. I've forgotten the name of the show. It was the darts one, and they used to go, and here's what you could have won, kind of thing.
Bullseye.
I was going to say bulldog, so I was like completely, I was thinking I'm getting it wrong. And it was depending upon the door that you chose. So it's like with anything, even if in life insurance it's not going to go too much higher. Let's say it goes from £5 to £15 a month. That still feels, well, I'd like the £5 a month option, please. And then you've got that horrible thing of like, well, you can't because of this health condition, which is then going to make the person feel really negative in terms of their health, possibly going to make them feel angry towards the insurer. They then just walk away then without anything. Whereas if you've gone in from the start saying, my research is showing that I actually think this is going to be about £15 a month, then that's much, much more likely to go ahead. We might have things as well in terms of exclusions. So usually more on the critical illness side, more on the income protection side of things. And there's not lots that we can do in all fairness if somebody objects to it. If they say, well, I want income, I've had this quite a bit, I want income protection without a mental health exclusion. And there are times that I've had to say to people based on their circumstances, that is unfortunately just not going to be available. And then they've walked away because they want something due to their mental health, which in a sense, from the insurer's point of view, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense as to why they put that mental health exclusion on there, because this person has a mental health condition. They want to be able to claim on mental health. So the insurer's saying no. And obviously this person just doesn't want it, even if you say, but there's so many other ways and reasons you could claim on this, but they want something that isn't available. And there's simply nothing we can do if that is the case. And the key thing when we're talking about the stuff like the exclusions is trying to start to say to people, this is what's going to be available. This is what it's still going to cover. The mental health side of things is an absolute nightmare because it's not just mental health. It's anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and they list and list and list all these different things. And that can feel really, really intense. But if we go away from like the mental health for a little bit, in a sense, cancer is quite a good one to use here. So let's say critical illness cover. And so a good one here, possibly somebody's had an abnormal smear. Now, most insurers won't be able to offer critical illness cover until that has been a normal smear, but some can. So the really key thing is to sort of go, so when can we? you know, and to do that kind of conversation. So when can we have the insurance? When can we have the critical illness cover? When can we have sort of like an exclusion taken off there? Same for things like breast cancer or other cancers as well. You know, if you're getting something, the client's saying, but I don't want to have an exclusion. Well, okay, so we have an objection. So we're going to find out when would that exclusion not be there. And then we can present it to the client and say, right, at this moment, there is going to be an exclusion there. Okay. As of this day, we'll be able to apply and there won't be an exclusion. Now, that might be 6 months' time. It might be 2 years' time, you know, depending upon that specific situation. So then we've received that objection. So all we can do then is say to people, right, okay, because obviously people have the right to say that they don't want something as well, if it's not going to be the full contract. We can say to them, you know, so like, right, so we're going to have an exclusion for now. My advice is to take the policy now. I appreciate it has the exclusion. We don't want it there. And we'll reapply as soon as we can do. And the reason I'm saying that is because if anything happens health-wise between now and then, it could mean that we can't get the insurance again or at all. You know, we might, instead of just having an exclusion, it just might not be available. And then
and there's all that premium stuff as well, isn't there? You know, you're locking in a premium level because you're a bit younger and all that kind of stuff. So there's loads and loads of reasons that you can do it and should do it, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Another area that we sometimes see objections is things like reviewable versus guaranteed premiums. And again, you can only go by what the client would want to do. So as an example, I would always give people, well, I'll always say, again, all singing, all dancing, we're going guaranteed premiums, Lee. And I will say to them from the start, you will see cheaper options. And I have seen the cheaper options and I've discounted them because of the fact that the cheaper options are going to increase over time. They look so, so nice right now, but over time, they are going to, it's going to make a big difference. So, you know, there was, you know, an example where we had, I had an income protection policy. These are really good ones to do it on. So income protection policy, and this is again showing your worth as the advisor, saying like, here's the guaranteed premium. It's £50 a month more than the reviewable option. And I know full well that £50 a month more, you know, you'd rather go for the one that's cheaper. Absolutely. Why wouldn't you? It'd be silly to not want to. However, let's look at the premiums over term. And with one client, it always stands out for me. It was £50 a month cheaper to go reviewable, but it meant over the term of the policy that it was £90,000 more expensive. That's not small change, you know, in a sense. And if you say to somebody, if you're going to pay it, you know, it was literally a case of, right, if we do it this way, over the next so many years, you're paying 30,000. But if you go reviewable and you stick with that policy and you want it to stay the same amount of time, you're paying 120 grand. That's a huge difference. And it'd be very unusual for somebody to go, again, like, I'd like that more cheaper option. So when we're talking about objection handling, it's having all that information to hand. It's knowing what we need to present to the client. It's, as I say, presenting it in the right way. So first of all, I mean, it's so much for us to do. We have to build the recommendation. We have to see how we're going to present it. We need to see those challenges as well that we're going to potentially be facing. And then sort of like counteract them as quickly as possible. So it isn't a case of, well, you didn't give me that cheaper option, you're just silly pricing. It's a case, no, I've seen it. There's reasons why we're ignoring it. And having that really open conversation as well. But again, just give the client the options. They might choose to go for the reviewable option. That's, in a sense, that's fine. That's their choice. But again, we'll be making sure that we put in our recommendation report, there was a guaranteed option that would have cost this much, but you've decided to go for this because we're going to make sure that we're being very clear as to what we advise versus what the client is wanting to take.
Yeah, you've just reminded me of something we used to do in terms of reports. When a client declined protection as part of our recommendations, they signed that page of the report.
Yeah.
They had declined it. And I know some firms use, in the financial planning end, they use kind of specific waiver forms and stuff like that, but we used to have it within the report. And actually, quite often at that stage, clients, as they focused in on what they were signing, saying, I don't want this, despite all the reasons that have been given that I should have it, they kind of changed their mind at that point.
Yeah.
But if they didn't, there was a very specific part of the report that they had signed, not just signed the report in totality.
Yeah.
They signed that particular page to say that they declined that part of the advice. And I think that's really important for protecting, you know, whether it's you're a financial planner or a mortgage advisor, a protection advisor, whoever. I think that's a really important thing to do, because we all know people's memories cloud
Yes.
when faced with calamity. They misremember, they will swear blind. And I had a client who did this. He was an airline pilot, one of the most analytical people I ever dealt with, and he swore blind he hadn't been told something, despite the fact he'd signed a particular page in the report, and he even tried to claim that it wasn't his signature. The ombudsman threw it. It was the one and only case I ever had that went to the ombudsman. The ombudsman threw it out.
Yeah.
But you've got to, you know, you can never legislate for people who misremember or who misrepresent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what can be quite useful, so probably an advantage that we sometimes have in the protection insurance space, especially if we're on the telephone, is that all of our calls have to be recorded.
Yeah.
And stored, you know. And it's I always find it interesting how in sort of like, especially if you're in protection and you're on your phone, you're less trustworthy than an IFA sat in an office being face to face with somebody. So I was just like, oh, okay. But I love it. I love having the phone recordings, because then I can just be like, no, this is actually the conversation that did happen, and here is proof. And as I say, and then it'll be my fact find. You know, our fact finds are specifically set up in our firm to go, did you recommend alternatives? Why didn't the client go ahead? So we can say, well, I gave these different options and they went for this option. I had it for somebody recently. I know you said about the couple, and it was interesting when you said about the man versus woman. And I think it was what I found interesting. And again, and I'm not saying this is an absolute or anything, but it's a bit of a stereotype, is that you tend to get that. I think women are aware that if they lose their partner, that it's going to massively affect them emotionally, everything. They're probably going to struggle to work. And it seems to be that men kind of think, I'll be all right after a few months. You know, you tend to kind of get that kind of thing, which is always a bit, ooh. You know, I had it recently, right? Sorry for my dog. I'm having a moment. Clearly the doorbell's gone. Luckily he can't get in here, else it'll be even louder. But, you know, we were arranging it. And so, you know, for somebody, it was a case of, right, you know, I'm going to be suggesting that we have this much money just to make sure that if you did need to take time away and be with the children, that you would have all this, you know, sort of like available to you, just so you could step away from work for a good while, you know, very much a high earner. And they said, yeah, I actually think I could probably do about half of that. I think that suits me. And it was a case of, that's fine. If that's what you feel's right, that is absolutely okay. So again, a bit of an objection, which is fine. But my reports and my documents say we looked at a range of options all the way up to this, which was my amount, and you have chosen to go with this option. Just so we can be very, very clear and say, you know, this was my recommendation, you know. And I think sometimes objection handling can actually almost seem a little bit of an intense, as if, like, you know, as if like it's really like I object kind of thing. And it's not. It's just a case of, sometimes it can be very, very direct and intense, but sometimes it's just a case of the client wants something slightly different to fit their needs. And as long as it's not doing anything that's completely out of your realm of comfort or advice area, if it makes sense to at least some level, then we should probably give people the opportunity to do what feels right for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've always got to remember there's an asymmetry of knowledge, isn't there? We're the professionals. We know our onions. They don't. And many people raise objections as part of their understanding process.
Yeah.
They're not no's. And I think it's easy to misinterpret an objection as a no.
Yeah.
They're actually trying to understand the way things go. And you know, some clients are very, very firm in their objections. Some are quite tentative. I'm pretty firm in my objection handling, because I really want the client to have the best outcome from any engagement I have with them. You know, and, you know, specific objections. I mean, I always remember sitting with one particular client who was adamant he didn't want life insurance, and his wife was with him, and they had two young kids. And he said in front of his wife, he said, well, if something happened to me, he used her name, she could sell the house and downsize. And I remember saying, yeah, perfect. So what you want, having just lost her life partner, is to uproot your family from the home, the safe haven of home, where you've built a life together, the trauma of losing you, potentially, you think that downsizing, having to go to work and find childcare is the option that you, but as I was talking, the wife was straight in saying, I don't know why you're objecting to this, we're having it.
Yeah,
You know, and sometimes you've got to be that firm, I think.
yeah,
Because he was quite a ballsy type. So we mirror people. I was kind of not ballsy, that's the wrong word, but kind of pretty firm back with them. So I think there are very, very specific objections, but in the main, most objections are clients trying to understand what you're giving them in a way that they can process the information. I think that's where, the 3Fs come in really well. And most people understand the 3Fs: feel, felt, found. And I think that's how do you think your wife would feel having to deal with selling the house, having just lost you as her life partner, having just lost your contributing income to the family budget and all that kind of stuff. I have found other clients felt like you did and all this kind of stuff. And I think those are really, really important skills to learn. And the more you do it, the better you get at it, I would say.
absolutely. And it's making it relatable as well. So like we were saying, like I said earlier about the trigger side of things, there's a trigger. They've come to speak to you for a reason. It might be that they've come to you to speak, like for me, on protection, potentially about income protection straight away. It might be they've come for mortgage or pension or something like that, but there is a concern that needs to be filled, and we need to present that in the right way to them, but also make it relatable, as you say, to the family as well. So remembering things like the kids' names or the partner's name, if you're not speaking to them both at the same time, and then saying and using that, just say somebody, a partner's name, Sarah, that lady was maybe Sarah, just goes, so basically, like you say, so what's Sarah going to do? Obviously she's just lost you, and what happens? For somebody where it's a mortgage, if they're single, especially no children, income protection right up there at the beginning. For me, everybody that we advise should have at least some form of income protection put in front of them if they are of working age and at work, because our income is so pivotal to everything that we do. So that conversation again of so the concern is, if someone comes to us, there's some kind of concern for something long-term financially, whether it be a mortgage or pension investment, whether or not it's looking after the children, there's some kind of long-term thing, and the income underpins every single part of it. So when we're starting that conversation, it's going to be a case of, right, so what we're going to be doing is, I see that you're wanting to do this and achieve this. At the same time, I'm going to be looking at ways to protect your income so that if something happens, you're unable to work, if you're ill, that all of this stays okay, and you're going to be secure going forward. You won't need to be worried about, money coming in or getting back to work if you're really, really ill. Mm-hmm. And again, it's that thing, if you have it from the start, and if you have it set that I am the advisor, this is the process, then it means that the conversations are going to work much, much better. They're much more likely to engage with it than if it's something that's just added on at the end, or it's a bit of there's a bit of a side thing here that we can discuss as well. It's like, no, there's not a side thing. This is coming hand in hand with everything that we are doing.
Which is why I think I said right at the beginning that, because I really feel this, it is the first building block of any financial plan, is to protect your loved ones through financial calamity by the very simple act, for a very modest cost, of passing the risk from you and your family to an insurance company. And I use that phrase all the time when I was doing protection, and people kind of get it. I don't know if we've got any questions. I think time-wise we're kind of heading on.
I don't think we do, but if we've got a couple of minutes, if anybody does want to suddenly ask a question, feel free to use the chat. Do feel free to come and speak on with us if you want to, but just remember that if you do, that it will go out onto the internet in a sense when we do the training. But if there's no questions at all, I can't see anything coming in, we can end the session.
So I've got one phrase that I'll drop in, Catherine, which is using the feel, felt, found.
Yeah.
And I know it's brutal, but I used to use it for that type of client, which was, I've had some clients feel the way you do about protection, but I've never found a widow to feel the same.
Yeah.
And it's brutal and it's strong, but actually, if it's delivered well and professionally in a contextual part of the discussion, and you can replace widow, with partner, with loved one, however you whatever type of couple you have. We live in an age where not everyone is husband and wife, that old-fashioned generic kind of husband and wife couple. But I genuinely think that even that makes some people think, it paints a picture. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's just made me remember as well, just I've got a really good example of that actually, is to the regret side of things in some ways. So my dad worked for the police and he was part of all their insurances. And he still can be as part of sort of like the retired police officers in terms of what they do. And he'd been part of the critical illness cover, and it had come to an end because of certain aspects and things like that. And the times that he'd kept on top of it and keeping that policy going. And then after it ended, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and it would have been a payout. So, you know, it does happen. And we've got no Parkinson's in our family at all. You know, as a condition, it's not usually hereditary. And yeah, he could have had a payout from that. And as you say, in terms of the regret and things like that, that was something that I do remember him very specifically, because obviously we work in insurance, and I remember specifically getting the documents and showing it to us and going, could it have paid out? And the answer was yes, it could have done. And there was absolutely significant regret there. And for people in that kind of situation, I can say that it is incredibly useful. And we're just currently at the moment, right now, my parents have been living with me for the last 4 months, and probably for another month or two. And because we're having to adapt their home, and this isn't a small thing, this is outer walls being demolished, it is extensions being done, obviously doorways being, you know, there's hoists being, you know, potentially allowed for, and everything to try and prevent the care home and the need to go into that. So what we're doing, you know, it is phenomenally important, especially for that long-term care for people. And whilst it's not long-term care planning, just to caveat that, you know, because that is a slightly different area, it is all adding towards that and giving people that long-term security.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is, you know, my final words are, we do a wonderful thing, that we protect families from disaster by this, as I say, this small transfer of money to an insurance company. And I think we do our clients a disservice if we don't do the best possible thing we can for them and convince them that we've identified the need and they should address it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for who's attended, and for people who are watching this on catch up. You can access a CPD certificate that should be available by next week on the website, just so that obviously you have your CPD, which is always very nice. If you have any thoughts or questions, always feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Lee as well, and we'll try and incorporate things into the sessions that are carrying on through the year. I believe there is one in July, but we are going to be having a break in August, just because it's summer holidays, and I think it'd be nice to sort of a break. But thank you, everybody, for coming, and I will hopefully see you all soon.
Thanks, everyone. Great to see you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Bye.